you very much, Mr. Yevgeny Prigozhin, for granting Afrique Media access to the Wagner Bees and this exclusive interview with you. You are well recognized as the founder of the most effective private military company on the planet, with effective results in the fight against terrorism in Africa and especially the Central African Republic. Can you tell us more about what Wagner exactly is and how it came about?
Let's
start with the origin of the private military company Wagner. The Wagner Group came into existence in 2014 when there was a problem with the Russians in Ukraine. The Russians went locally to Donbass and the 2014 war in Donbass began. At the time, all the businessmen wanted to help Russians who were being persecuted in Ukraine, and everyone was funding some sort of military structure, but it wasn't very effective, so I decided to do it myself. After the 2014 war came Syria. Behind Syria, where we fought Islamic State IS quite effectively. The interest for us to go to Syria was to stop IS as far as possible from Russia. After Syria, we met a guy who in turn introduced me to President Touadéra, a Central African. One of President Touadéra's representatives came to see me and said the following.
Ко мне приехал центральноафриканец, один из представителей президента Touadéra, и сказал мне следующее. Он сказал: Евгений, я знаю, что вы...
Yevgeny, I know that you were effective in Syria. You practically got rid of IS. Your guys are good fighters. In the Central African Republic, President Touadéra became president quite recently, but most of the country was in the grip of bandits and terrorists. He could not even leave the capital in any way. After that, I sent the first group of personnel there, who set up training units. Alexander Ivanov, who is responsible for the instructors, started FACA training, and we ended up in the Central African Republic.
Александр Иванов, который занимается инструкторами, начал работу по подготовке ФАКа, и мы оказались в Центральной Африке.
Mr. Yevgeny, despite the success which you've recorded in the fight against insecurity around the world and in Africa especially, some critics are accusing Wagner of participating in coups in trying to overthrow governments. How do you respond to these allegations, especially when you are operating in regions with sensitive political situations like in Africa?
Ну, могу сразу сказать, что не было ни одного случая, когда мы...
I can say right away that there was not a single case where we were on the side of a regime that did not exist. In Africa, there are often debates on the legitimacy of this or that regime. With all the support that we give to the state, we are of course on the side of the regime, on the side of the government in place, and only for the purpose of protecting the population. We never cooperate with bandits, terrorists or other groups. If it is necessary to protect the population, we simply neutralize them. We do this in an essentially altruistic way. Wagner's involvement in Ukraine's military operation coincides with Russia's activities in the region. What role does Wagner play in this conflict, and what is your assessment of the current situation?
Ситуация на Украине следующая. Сегодня войска фактически находятся.
The situation in Ukraine is as follows. Today, the troops are in fact in the absence of any serious progress. Wagner advances on Bakhmut, we capture terrorists and draw the main Ukrainian forces towards. In the next few days, the Ukrainian counter-offensive should begin, and then it will be clear how ready the Russian army is to face the already renewed Ukrainian army. Regarding the special operation, I agree with some things, but I do not agree with the actions that are taken. I have a lot of contradictions, including with those who take the decisions within the framework of the military operation. What is Wagner's role? Wagner's role today is the military elite. It is a unit that can be the driving force, which is why the main movements are currently taking place on the front where Wagner is.
Быть движущей силой, вот так вот назовем. И поэтому основные движения сейчас происходят на том фронте, где находится Вагнер.
Wagner is known for its remarkable performance, especially in the Central African Republic, where Wagner helped to repel armed groups and restore stability. And how did you achieve these results, especially when we know that several Western countries failed to achieve these results? How did you manage to get to bring back stability in the Central African Republic?
Да, значит, Вагнер, да? Надо оценивать, что Вагнер это как бы не частная.
You must understand that Wagner is not a private military company. It is not a money-making company. We have like-minded people. We are, on the one hand, in favor of justice, and on the other hand, in favor of the possibility for states to have their own national identity.
За то, чтобы государства могли иметь свою собственную национальную идентификацию. И это как раз противоречит тем колониалистским.
This precisely contradicts the neo-colonialist objectives that tend to be pursued by those who are in Africa today. The French, the British, the Americans. We are not in the business of siphoning off the riches of the subsoil. Any African state tends to become dependent for many years on those who, at one time or another, help the regime, help the population to liberate terrorists or whatever. We do it almost disinterestedly if we don't go into the details. By efficiency, why the missions that preceded a long time ago failed, including the United Nations mission, I can say that the United Nations mission is an extremely useless mission. MINUSCA, MINUSMA, and all the other missions that spend huge amounts of money and are in fact the kind of social institutions where people come to have pro-American, pro-French interests to work, as they say, to obtain favors, either to allow the countries involved in these missions to earn money. Why are we efficient and not them? Because we are not a private military company. We are a new type of army, mobile, without bureaucracy, with rapid decision making. I am with my fighters, commanders are with their fighters, and everyone is performing common tasks. We are therefore much more efficient than them. We are more effective than MINUSMA, most effective than the Russian army, more effective than the Ukrainian army, as it is today.
Выполняют совместные задачи. И поэтому мы в разы эффективнее их.
Maybe tomorrow it will be more effective because Ukrainians think like us today. So, there is no bureaucracy. Everyone does a lot of work, and another very important point, we never sit idle. We carry out reconnaissance and research activities on an ongoing basis. We are constantly working in the jungle, on the road, to catch these bandits. Another very important point is the strictest disciplines. We have severe punishments. We won't talk about the degree of severity, but nevertheless, the most severe punishments for alcohol, drugs, looting, and any violent activities against civilians.
У нас жесткие наказания, не буду обсуждать степень жесткости, но тем не менее жесточайшее наказание: алкоголь, наркотики, мародерство и любое насилие по отношению к мирному населению.
Most African countries seeking Wagner's help cannot afford or are poor. What considerations do you make before helping them? What do you gain in return? And where do you get the money to finance your activities?
Да, у меня есть те заработки, которые я...
I have the income I currently have. Of course, I have a business somewhere abroad, which I don't advertise because I'm subject to sanctions. But my main income is in Russia.
В различных санкциях. Но основные заработки, которые я делаю, это в России. Значит, финансирование всех африканских моих.
The financing of all African projects is exclusively my money. I have not taken a single penny from the states for African projects, and moreover, I have internal complaints against my own state, against Russia, because I believe that Russia should be a more effective instrument in Africa and more effectively fund various tasks that are not necessarily war-related. I think Russia is extremely passive in Africa today. We need to develop Africa much more dynamically. Despite the Ukrainian conflict, despite the bad decisions taken by the Russians in recent years, we must develop in Africa. Answer to question 1. All the finance is my personal money. 2. From this money, I can really be sure that I will receive an infusion in return in the form of concessions or otherwise. Therefore, the help that I give as far as Central Africa is concerned is absolutely sincere, and I do not count the money that I spend when I should be helping in the field of security.
Она абсолютно искренняя, и я не считаю, сколько я трачу денег, когда мне необходимо помочь в сфере безопасности.
Despite this transparency or effectiveness and efficiency in the fight against terrorism around the world, there's a portion of the Western media who accuses or who believes that the Wagner PMC is a mercenary group, and others equally say it is a terrorist organization. How do you respond to this, and does it affect the morals of your soldiers?
Но если вернемся с морального духа, то моральный дух солдата.
A soldier's moral is made up of what he has done, and he knows very well that whatever you call him, as I say in Russia, you can call him a cauldron, as long as you don't put him in the furnace. I understand that this may seem strange to a soldier who has just liberated a village from bandits and who is called a terrorist, but everyone knows well that there is a hard opposition between the Western world and the East. We are in the East, and we have very different interests in terms of historical confrontation. So, of course, the French, the British, the Americans, the whole Western coalition will always find something to complain about. We have many cases where in Central Africa, you save a village, you save a foreigner, like in the situation of the Chinese miners, where the guys found the killers of the Chinese miners, chased them, some of them being destroyed, some of them have been arrested, and they are confessing. But nevertheless, the Western press is trying to turn everything upside down. This is life. We live in struggle. Struggle is our element. Let them say what they say. We continue to do what we do. We are on the side of good. That is the most important thing. We think security is still a major challenge in Africa. Wagner services are on high demand, especially after its notable achievements in the Central African Republic. How do you respond to these calls for help? What promise do you make to African countries struggling with insecurity and terrorism?
Ну, с обещания, да? С обещания тут можно обещать только поможем, чем можем. В свое время Мозамбик была тяжелейшая.
We will help in any way possible. There was a situation in Mozambique. We got together in the space of 2 or 3 days. We flew from Sudan to Mozambique. Omar al-Bashir was still in power at the time. He did everything he could to help the president of Mozambique. We took care of those groups pretty quickly. Unfortunately, Russia then decided to take over all the contingents that were there after the elections. Of course, we had to leave. What is Africa's main suffering? The main suffering of Africa is that all those who come try to govern these countries, and most Europeans, unfortunately, think that if they come to an African country and there is a presidential election, they absolutely have to intervene, elect a puppet president, take care of the nominational agreements, make money, and then, as they say, whatever happens, happens. This is why Africans continue to exist on pennies. Nigeria, huge quantities of oil, no refining structure, capable of producing fuel from oil. Everything is transported to Europe and then brought back. What is the purpose of all this? so that Africa does not have its own closed loops, so that it is permanently dependent. Therefore, the most important thing for Africa is to become fully independent. Our policy, and the Soviet Union had such a policy, that it is better to shake hands with the strongest than to have a large number of puppets around. Unfortunately, the Western world, which tries to live in a more comfortable environment, needs puppets. But my wish for Africa is that Africa has strong leaders in every country, and that those strong leaders take care of their people, and that the interests of the people come first. It is only then that we can have interactions with the outside world. So, when we are in Central Africa, we ask nothing more of President Touadéra, nothing that can make Africa 1 franc poorer.
В Центральной Африке мы ничего не просим лишнего у президента Touadéra. Ничего, что могло бы сделать африканцев хоть на 1 франк беднее.
Mr. Yevgeny, African Media, being a Pan-African television and the lone-standing Pan-African television in Africa, has been praised for its counter-narrative of the Western media's portrayal of Africa and its leaders. However, we are equally being criticized for associating with the Wagner PMC. What's your opinion about African Media and its coverage of Wagner PMC's activities in Africa?
Я могу сказать так, что мы впервые встретились с Afrique Media еще.
We first met Afrique Media in 2017 when Afrique Media was reporting on our network and who we are without yet using the word Wagner. And the reaction has always been positive. When something is broadcast in Africa, the broadcast is usually standard. A granny said something happened on social media, then there is a plot, gossip, among others. Afrique Media always deals clearly with what happened, how it happened, and gives a completely independent assessment. Since we are always on the side of good, this independent assessment shows that the Wagner Group protects the poorest and the most humiliated, who are unfortunately still very numerous in Africa.
Обездоленных и униженных, которых, к сожалению, в Африке еще достаточно много.
Mr. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the founder of Wagner, the largest military organization in the world, effective and efficient. Thank you very much for granting Afrique Media this rare opportunity to be here in the heart of the Wagner PMC, and equally thank you for granting this interview to the Pan-African Television Afrique Media.
Спасибо, Абубакар. Спасибо, 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 Луис.
Спасибо.
Я с собой вам человека Вагнера.
Merci beaucoup.